Southeast sports fans? I'm Hanna Barton, joined by Brenden Schaeffer. Today, we're previewing your reigning SEC champions, 2025 Georgia Bulldogs. This Georgia team, as I mentioned, has a lot of expectations to live up to coming off the SEC championship last year, a run that brought them all the way to the Sugar Bowl, where they lost to Notre Dame. And this Georgia team looks a little bit different on the offensive side. Defense, they restocked as always, but high expectations regardless heading in for Kirby Smart and this Georgia Bulldogs team.
Oh, Hannah, there always are. You always are going to have expectations when you're the Georgia Bulldogs. And we saw a little bit of the guy that will be their starting quarterback this year, the end of last season. Gunner Stockton is taking over the quarterback spot. You mentioned there's always going to be changes for Georgia because they send so many guys to the league each and every year. But I kind of like the way that the offense lines up for them. I think Nate Frazier is going to be a pretty good running back. They bring back an experienced tight end in Oscar Delp. And of course, across your wide receiver core, a number of guys that can make a big difference. So I don't really know exactly where we plot as far as whether the offense or the defense will be more impactful for Georgia this season. It always feels like they do such a good job of having a depth chart defensively where the next guys up may not have been starters the previous season. And in the following year, they're in the NFL. That seems like what we might have again this year for Georgia. So I'd say they probably lean on their defense, but allow Gunner Stockton to manage the game, be what he needs to be for that offense, to put Georgia right back where they always are, in contention for some serious hardware at the end of the season.
Gunner Stockton, one start last season, and that was in that Sugar Bowl where they ended up losing to Notre Dame. He played 5 games last season, though. Obviously, Carson Beck was the starting quarterback for Georgia previously, had some injuries where Stockton had to step in or maybe resting Beck a little bit. He was 45 for 64, threw for 440 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He struggled on the ground. This is one thing that stood out to me when we were looking at him is he had 21 carries for minus 13 yards. So definitely want to see his run game improve a little bit more as he steps into that full role as a starter. And not just him, but they're kind of going to need to step up their run game overall. Georgia has produced, as we know, some pretty explosive running backs in the past, but where they've done a really great job is restocking that wide receiver room from both the portal and obviously as they always bring in a talented recruiting class.
Yeah, 100%. And it's going to be across the board. I don't have any doubt that Gunner Stockton is going to have weapons to use when you look at kind of the projected depth chart. You know that Noah Thomas, Dylan Bell are guys that are expected to be up there. Colby Young is going to play a good amount. Zachariah Branch projects to be in there in the slot. Like they've got a lot of guys that they'll be able to spread the football around. But I really do think that when it all boils down, we kind of mentioned when we did a preview of the Texas Longhorns, which is going to be obviously one of the big contenders alongside Georgia for an SEC championship. Longhorns couldn't get past the Dogs last year. And if you're down there in Athens, you're thinking that's going to be the same way that this goes this year. We're going to continue under Kirby Smart, who's really the most accomplished coach in America, going to continue to do what we do. I really want to see Nate Frazier break out this year in a major way with the running back room and kind of lead the charge there, the sophomore. I think he's extremely talented, and I think he's the perfect running back to have for a quarterback that you said only started 1 game last year, was kind of thrown into the fire. He's more experienced. He's been in college for a few years, but I think Georgia's going to want to lean on its defense and its run game first and foremost, and they'll kind of take it from a standpoint of until you prove that you can stop those things, we're not going to need to ask a ton of Gunner Stockton to lead this team. And I think that's going to be a plan that in most games is going to work for Georgia this season.
There is one piece of that concerns me a little bit, and that's their offensive line. They did lose 4 of their starters on the offensive line, so might be a little bit of a learning curve, especially those first couple games for those new guys getting in there and being able to do what's necessary to allow them to rely on the run game and see Nate Frazier really step into his own. But then also protect a quarterback like Gunner Stockton, where we just mentioned didn't have the best success when it comes to being on his feet last season. So you throw that in with the factor of an offensive line that could look different and newer and greener. I think the offense is going to have definitely a little bit more of a learning curve early on in the season. But as we had mentioned, it's Georgia, which means defense is going to remain the staple and going to be something that they have time and time again done a great job in restocking and making sure that regardless of how many guys they lose to the NFL draft, which seems to be a lot each and every year, they're able to reload and still just be one of the best defensive teams in the country.
Yeah, you know what's interesting though is like at times last year, I feel like the offensive line for Georgia underperformed and wasn't necessarily as sharp as it needed to be, and so maybe that was holding you back a little bit to be that well-oiled machine that we're used to seeing Georgia be. Kirby Smart has told ESPN that the offensive line is going to be key. There's a lot of new parts there, but I think that can almost be a benefit where you say, hey, last year maybe a little bit stagnant on the line, didn't get quite the consistency that you wanted from that group. And so I have no doubt that the type of recruiting that Georgia does, we may not know exactly where all the pieces and parts are going to fit across the O-line just yet. But I would honestly say if it's not one of the top O-lines in the SEC, I would ultimately be surprised because that is the way that they have been able to recruit it. I do think back to this notion that Kirby Smart has mentioned where like the modern era of transfer portal, a lot of the teams are now kind of able to access talent. We see, schools like Indiana, for example, when they're signing big names out of the transfer portal, you go, okay, like the playing field really has been leveled compared to the traditional blue bloods being able to stock up the talent and then keep it on their depth chart for 2-3 years before they finally unveil it. And it's like, oh yeah, that's an NFL player that's been sitting on the sidelines for their freshman and sophomore seasons. That still happens to an extent at Georgia, but Kirby Smart has talked about like the portal has changed that element because Georgia was one of the teams that was always the top dog. They had the 2 deep and even maybe the 3 deep that they could rely upon in terms of their roster depth. But now with guys being able to go other places, play quicker, and have the allure of maybe some NIL money to go along with that, the depth has been tested in ways that I think in Kirby Smart's early tenure, he didn't necessarily endure or experience. So that is a little bit of a different look to things. But I also believe, when you look at the way things break down for Georgia this year, as we give you a look at their schedule, there's a lot of games that we're going to go in saying, hey, tough schedule, but we expect Georgia to be favored and probably ultimately come away with the win in a lot of those, as we'll kind of get into when we talk win totals here in a little bit.
Yeah, one thing that I think is going to be a benefit to Georgia, where when we had talked about Texas previously, Texas starts off with a heavy hitter in Ohio State. Georgia kind of gets to build into it, I would say is an understatement, having both Marshall and Austin Peay at home. But then Tennessee away, I think, is going to be a really kind of hard hitter when it comes to their first true test of the season. And we're going to, like you said, go into that more once we hear from Chris Dimino and Kylie. But I think you're going to be able to see some of these younger guys develop those first couple games. Gunner Stockton, like we talked about. One thing I do want to bring up, and Chris Dimino is going to talk about this, we had discussed Gunner Stockton versus Carson Beck, not just from an X's and O's standpoint, but just as a teammate and as a person. You've got Carson Beck and the sports cars that he was driving and, kind of showing off. Gunner Stockton drives his granddad's old beat up pickup truck. And when I think of a University of Georgia quarterback, I think of more of a Gunner Stockton in terms of an off the field personality than I do of a Carson Beck. So, and maybe it's a reach, but I'm interested to see how that translates into being a leader in the locker room.
Yeah, and not to, kick a guy on the way out the door, although I think some Georgia fans were ready to see a change at quarterback. Believe that other guy's at Miami. So when you talk about the way that the personalities maybe mesh with the profile of a program, I think Georgia fans are ready to rally behind Gunner Stockton this year. I really do.
Especially what we've seen in recent years for these quarterbacks that have come in and stepped up from Georgia. And Dimino's going to dive more into that. And we're going to go ahead and send it to Kylie. And she's going to get more into that conversation that her and I were able to have with him. And then we'll have more on that Georgia schedule coming up after this.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. Well, like you said, we got to talk to Chris Dimino at SEC Media Days, who said that Kirby Smart, among active coaches, is one of 2 with 2 national championships right now. He also said that Carson Beck just might not have fit that Georgia standard as well as Gunner Stockton is going to. Now, let's hear more from him.
Georgia.
Yeah.
Kirby Smart.
Yeah.
And company. Got to hear from them today. What are your thoughts?
My man is a two-time
two-time national champion. How many of those guys are around? There aren't even a handful of coaches who've won a national title. Now, Ryan Day got in.
Right.
But when you have two, when you go back-to-back in a world where everything is changing, it seems, every day, I respect the hell out of him. Now, I will also tell you that at a certain point, he's the right age. And with what goes on in NIL and, people asking instead of, I joke, if you meet Kirby Smart and you have your hand out like this, like you're waiting for cash, you're probably not going to be for Kirby Smart. You might be missing an opportunity, but Kirby Smart's probably, in my opinion, going to get tired one day of playing by these rules, and he's going to go to the NFL. Because I think he's man enough to be in the NFL. I think he's a communicator to be in the NFL. He loves college football. He's doing it at his alma mater. But there'll be a day when guys like him will just say this isn't worth it. 365, I got to kiss your rear end on Saturday nights after a game. I got to kiss your rear end on a Wednesday during the offseason to make sure you don't go to the transfer portal. At a certain point, there are certain things that will drive guys like that out of the game, not keeping in them.
Interesting. That's actually so interesting to hear. But you mentioned the number 2, 2 times national champion. Georgia also beat Texas 2 times last year. And then they will host Texas this coming year.
Yeah.
Kind of what's the expectation for this season?
So it's Gunner Stockton. It's so easy to say it's always going to be the quarterback because it is. Way too much credit when things go well, way too much blame. So let's just live in a world where most of us live in the middle. The reality is we don't know what he is. Texas can tell you, and I've heard Paul Feinbaum and others tell me what they believe Arch Manning is. I've heard Jordan Rodgers tell me I'm going to rank the quarterbacks in the SEC, and that's fine because we're in the ranking season, we're in the list season. But at the end of the day, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea what a guy's going to do when he gets cracked in a game. You have no idea what it's going to be like on a Saturday night when a quarterback loses. Is he the guy that goes to treatment the next day and rallies everybody around? Not like Tim Tebow. This will never happen again. There's a subtle way to do that. You don't know about a guy until he does it. So it's mostly quarterback. The other part is a lot of drop passes, way too many drop passes. And the strange thing about Georgia, if you look at their running back history, it's incredible. It's littered with really talented guys. There hasn't been a guy now for a few years, even during the national title years, that you just said, when we're up 4 points, we got 4 minutes left, turn to your left, turn to your right, that guy will end this game for us. They've sort of been missing in that category, and maybe it's why it's a little bit tougher every year now going forward to be as complete a team as you need to be to win a title without a little bit more luck.
So you mentioned the offense, moved to the defense. That has been kind of the staple of Georgia in recent years. They've had to restock, which we've seen them do that in recent years, though it doesn't seem to be a problem. What do you think, one, is the key to that? I mean, obviously, I know recruiting is going to be part of it, but the development piece, but then also, like, what does the defense look like this year?
So one of the things they've gotten really right is whether it's social, physical, emotional, getting out of the house for the first time, you've got to figure out as a staff, are you for me and are we for you? But the first part is, are you for us? Like, are you the type of guy that we think if you're here, and I don't mean stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, that's arbitrary. Like, that's sort of a mythical thing. But do we think we can bring you in? And if you're here, how quickly can we get you up to here? Our job is to do it. Your job is to accept the idea that we need to do this because you're not a finished product. There's a board. It's called the Butts-Mehre Building. And there's a board up there that has all of the money, over $1 billion of contracts, NFL contracts signed by the University of Georgia players. I don't know how many other schools do it. But my number one recruiting tool and my number one, you really want to go to the transfer portal, I'd point up there and I would go to Howie Roseman and others. He's the general manager of the Eagles, who's drafted a bunch of these guys. There's not a team in the NFL that doesn't say the Georgia players are the most prepared to come into camp as rookies over everybody. That's a great recruiting tool. Take advantage of that if you're a defensive player. You might not play minute one when you've never watched a football game your whole life. There's an ends to a mean. Don't run for the portal. Don't cry to your mommy. Don't believe that it's an open door policy to go ask a coach, why am I not playing? It really doesn't work like that. Do your time. University of Georgia is a handful of schools. If you do your time, it pays off in the end. How much development do these guys want? That's the thing they've been pretty good at. They've grabbed the right guys in that department.
Yeah, definitely. And you talk about kind of, getting the right people, recruiting and the transfer portal and all that stuff. But they also had to get rid of a bunch of people on the offensive line also. And so they've rebuilt that. What will that look like?
So Kirby Smart, the first, second, and third thing he said when we sat down with him, First, second, and third. He comes from Alabama. He said, we ain't big enough up front. We're not athletic enough up. He said that before he literally blew a whistle at the University of Georgia. He knew because he had played Georgia. What do we have at Alabama they don't have? We got size and we got athleticism up front. And Kirby Smart, even though he played as a defensive back, he's smart enough to realize the closer you are to the football, the closer you are to those two groups, offensive and defensive line, you can win the season or lose the season. So there, while you would like more experience, he's used the word that we have more hunger with this group than he's seen in a while because there are a lot of guys who've done nothing. They've watched more football than they've ever watched their whole life. Now let's let them loose, and let's find out if they really want to play football at the SEC level.
Yeah. Callie had talked about that Texas game coming up this season. They'll host Texas, host Ole Miss, will be at Tennessee for their SEC opener. So it's another schedule that's not necessarily a walk in the park. But what are these kind of like, you think, momentum shift games for Georgia?
We had Laura Rutledge on today, and they were talking about it for the last 2 days. The top 11 strength of schedule schools are SEC schools.
Of course.
Missouri's 20th in the whole country, but people will look at Missouri's schedule and go, well, that's easy. Relative to everybody else's, it might be. The SEC did something really fascinating for the first 2 years with Texas and Oklahoma. Every game that you played on the road last year, you're now getting the host. Georgia's home schedule last year, if you look at it, it was terrible. If I'm a fan, I go, oh, it's not really. This year, you get it all back. All those road games are at home. And what matters is if you lose at home, even in a 12-team playoff, lose twice at home as opposed to on the road, they bang you more for losing at home. So while you want those games, you better realize that if you lose a game at home, it costs you more than losing against the same opponent, same circumstances had you been on the road. This is a really it's a I hate to say it's a good schedule because it's tough, but it's a great schedule if I'm a student at Georgia. If I'm somebody that goes to games, I am getting my money's worth this year with Texas coming in on top of it because it almost feels like very quickly, and I don't know who you guys believe South Carolina's biggest rival is, Missouri's biggest rival is, Georgia, Auburn, Georgia, Alabama to some degree, but now Georgia, Texas feels like, oh, wait, they picked them number one. We get a shot at what's supposed to be the best team in the country. We'll take it, and we'll be ready for it. So I kind of like Georgia, Texas, how big it's become in a really short amount of time.
Yeah, you like Georgia, Texas, but then you also Kirby Smart is 1-6 against Alabama.
Yeah, and they're 1-9 in their last 10 regular season games against Texas. Against Alabama, and that's the number that everybody looks at. The only pox on Kirby Smart's entire resume is that number against Alabama. That's the only thing that people can look at. He beats top 10s, he beats top 25s. They went at home, they went on the road, they kicked the crap out of non-conference schools. All of that is there. He won't talk about one school that way, even in the week they play Alabama, but it's the one thing that everybody knows. That number exists. And I just, even if you beat them for a title, somebody's going to bring up how few times you've beaten them. And that sticks in everybody's craw a little bit. Because if you want to say that you're the best, you have to beat the right team at the right time, but you also can't really have a losing record against somebody.
Yeah, and that game is somewhat early on in the SEC schedule for Georgia. Like, what do you think they're going to beat Alabama this year? What do you think you'll see there?
So I don't know enough. I'm going to be really honest. I don't know enough about what you'll have going in. Kirby saw this with Alabama and Nick Saban with the quarterbacks. I give you more rope as long as you prove you respect the football. Nick Saban didn't want to throw the football, but when he had a couple of quarterbacks who could and didn't throw picks, they opened up their playbook. I think that's what will happen with Gunner Stockton. I think they'd like to keep it conservative. You don't want to be trailing. You know, if you played a conservative style, you don't want to have to play with your hair on fire down 11 points with 9 minutes left to play. It's a bad place to be. But once Gunner Stockton shows he respects the football, that playbook is going to open up. He's been in the system for a long time, so that's good. But I think you get to do whatever you want. We'll use all the pages in the playbook. If you tell me how Gunner Stockton has done in the first few games, I'll tell you if I think they have a better chance to beat Alabama, because I think there are certain schools that you want to get out 11 on. Like you want to get out a score and a half. And if you do that, your defense should be good enough to make sure they don't do something that's so different that you're not able to handle it. So I think the quarterback play, this one's legit. How much will he let Gunner Stockton play quarterback? early on in the season.
Yeah. Sticking with Stockton. So this is coming from someone, SEC football fan, follows Georgia, maybe not be a Georgia fan. So from the Georgia fan, someone close to the Georgia team's perspective, I'd like to know your opinion on this because you look at Carson Beck and you look at Gunner Stockton. And not even talking about their play, but just personality, everything. Completely. I mean, it seems like opposite ends of the spectrum. So what does that look like?
Yeah,
I mean,
Carson Beck, once I started to see all the TikToks and the dancing, and I thought he got pulled by the nose by his now ex-girlfriend, I guess, I was horrified by it. Like, I need even Caleb Williams, the kid who was drafted by the Bears, out of your fingernails and you're crying in the stands and everything else. And I'm like, there's only one position in sports. I'll let you be whoever you want to be. But there's an expression in the movie Bull Durham. If you're good enough, you can be a goof. I can't have my quarterback being goofy. I will tell you what I believe. Carson Beck in the Lamborghini was problematic. Carson Beck in the Dig Me was problematic. With Gunner Stockton, do you know the story? He drives his grandfather's
pickup. I mean,
and everybody said, well, what's the difference? I said, well, there's the difference. If I'm an offensive lineman and I'm looking at who's the guy I want to have a beer with, who's the guy that I believe if crap gets tough, it's not because you're not tough, but if crap goes wrong, Gunner Stockton's played a lot less than Carson Beck. I think Gunner Stockton wins the room over a guy who I believe was goofy. Like I'm not saying this after he transferred. I said it while he was there. I was like, this guy might have too much goof in him to have me really root.
I agree. I mean, like I said, someone looking at the Georgia football program that's not a diehard fan, I'm thinking, okay, when you think of a Georgia quarterback, I'm seeing Gunner Stockton. I'm not really seeing Carson Beck.
Stetson Bennett. I still argue with guys I work with who go, well, Aaron Murray and Matthew Stafford. I said, are you crazy? I'll take Stetson Bennett all week, all month, all year. And I think, not as big an arm, not as big in stature, whatever it is you might say about him, I'll go to war with my guy because I've seen him win, as opposed to the guys who win the underwear Olympics. I'm a little tired of hearing about underwear Olympic winners who get paid money just because somebody told them they were fabulous. And then there was a bidding war, so they must be fabulous. Stetson Bennett, I watched David Pollock's career, and go look up David Pollock highlights. David Pollock he's the best Georgia player I've ever seen. He's probably one of the top 3 college players I've ever seen. He played out of fear. He was afraid somebody was going to take his job. He was a fullback. He became a defensive end, a 3-time All-American. He's here in this building in the College Football Hall of Fame. Stetson Bennett, I don't know how quickly he's supposed to be in the College Football Hall of Fame, but he's supposed to be in the College Football Hall of Fame. And I'd put him in before any of the Georgia quarterbacks I've seen in 31 years. He's a winner. I don't care what his stats are. I don't care what his numbers aren't. Like, there's an eyeball test, and I follow a lot of baseball. I'm tired of, propeller heads, guys who just want to shove an analytics down your throat. You go, I'm watching this. What are you watching? You're looking at a piece of paper. I'm actually watching a guy play. Stetson Bennett is probably the second best Georgia player I've ever seen in terms of put him in a foxhole. I'll take David Pollock and I'll take Stetson Bennett. And they've had first-round draft picks coming out of my rear end and yours. I'll still take Stetson Bennett because I saw what it is he did when nobody expected him to do anything. The guy transferred away and came back in.
Do you see Gunner Stockton having the potential to be one of those guys?
He a little bit more legs. Yes. Athlete. Yes. I think there's an all shucks to him. Stetson Bennett didn't have all shucks. Stetson Bennett had blank you. There is a difference. I hope the all shucks turns into all shucks blank you, or blank you all shucks, because it's the one part of his game we don't know about. When it gets tough, like, what are you going to do? What are you not going to do?
Exactly. I think, kind of wrapping it up here, what would Kirby Smart come off the field with at the end of the season and be happy with?
Team gets better over the course of the year, not worse. Don't regress. If there's an injury, next man up is a real big thing with them. They brought you in there to play football. They didn't bring you in to watch. Freshman, sophomore, whatever it is. If you're not good enough now, prove to me that you are, and people are going to get hurt. The college playoff thing is easy. I like the way you actually worded that, because it's not about, oh, look, we're 10-2 and we're one of the top 12. That's not going to satisfy Kirby Smart. There's a way you get there. Are you best prepared at 10-2 to go into a playoff game and actually win? Go on the road in somebody else's environment in this playoff system and win. The only thing I know that There's not been one SEC coach I've ever met. You guys have heard the mantra, we don't look ahead past next week.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about next week. The one thing that they'll tell you is they do write the date of the SEC championship on a board 2 rooms back.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in that room, and I'm not allowed in that room. But they will write down the date of the SEC championship in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and that's the goal. And if you get there, anything could happen. I think Kirby Smart is at the point where it's not we can win football games. They know that. We have talented guys. Are we peaking? Are we getting better? And the mistakes that we made, are we absolutely making sure there are fewer than more at the end of the season when things are really going to count?
Yeah.
I don't think it's measured in the record. I don't think it's measured in yardage and everything else. What's your defensive ranking? I think he has to believe that after 12 games, going into hopefully an SEC championship game, they've eliminated a lot of the nonsense that will happen to a team over the course of a year.
On the flip side, what would Georgia fans consider a successful season?
It's, I'm going to say it, and I hate it. It's championship or bust.
Mm.
I mean, there's no not playing for a championship now. And what's crazy is it's not just the SEC championship, which is still a big deal. We don't even know if there's going to be an SEC championship in a few years. We don't know what the conference is going to look like. But Georgia fans, whether it's spoiled, and part of it is being spoiled, it's winning a championship. And it used to be win the SEC championship, let's see what happens. I think we're a little bit past that now around here.
All right, we're back now taking a deeper look at this Georgia Bulldogs schedule for 2025, looking at the odds, looking at the numbers. Have them at 9.5 win totals right now, which, interesting enough, is the same as Texas, who we predict will most likely be the biggest contender with the Bulldogs for that SEC championship. But Brenden, as you take a look at this schedule, what are some games that you think may tip the scale or be a favorable outcome for Georgia?
Yeah, and honestly, I'll be real with you, Bulldogs fans. Like, your schedule is tougher than Texas's, in my opinion. Like, you've got each other on your schedule, obviously, and Texas had to face Ohio State. That'll be a fun game in week 1 to kind of kick off the college football season. But, I mean, Georgia's got some other landmines that I just don't think Texas has to deal with when you're thinking about, like, qualification for the SEC championship game in the first place. You mentioned that first conference game is a road game at Tennessee. Now, I do have Georgia winning that game. I think that with the turmoil that they've experienced in Knoxville, the quarterback situation is up in the air. We obviously know what happened with Nico. I feel like Georgia's going to be the program that is more ready to come in and handle their business. Like, Kirby Smart's going to have these guys ready. That's not a program that you worry about when you say, well, it's their first road game. What are they going to look like? I think we're pretty confident in what Georgia's going to look like. So as much as that is a game I think they're going to win, I'll at least make note that, like, Texas doesn't have many games like that where they have to go to another school and have an actual difficult game on paper. Anything can happen in the SEC, but on paper, I think they kind of have more of a cakewalk through a lot of those road conference games. Georgia's got to go to Texas and then Tennessee, and then the very next week you host Alabama. Again, you get the Tide at home. That's one that Georgia's going to want to pick up. And, like, Alabama's dealing with its own stuff right now where they probably, I guess you could say, underperformed under Kalen DeBoer in the first year because they want to make the playoff every year. It didn't happen. But you talk about Tennessee, Alabama, and also having teams like the cocktail party against Florida that you have to play every year. And then you still do play Texas later on. If I'm looking at the odds on clearing the number, which is 9.5 wins for Georgia with minus 170 odds on over, it's the same odds that Texas had to clear that number. I think Texas has an easier path to doing it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Georgia can't still make the SEC championship game, even if they do end up going, say, 9-3 and falling a little bit short of that number. I don't know how confident I would be in the over just because of the vast difficulty of the schedule and the fact that it's like odds that expect you to really clear that over. But as I walk through it, Tennessee's game that I'm going to chalk up as a win. Alabama at home, it's tough, but I'm going to still chalk it up as a win. Same thing with Ole Miss at home. So, like, the more I get through it, the more I don't really see 3 losses on the schedule for Georgia. I would just be a little bit hesitant to bet the over 9.5 with the minus 170 odds. Basically, you're betting $17 to win 10 in profit. If you're betting it that way, that's just not a lot of return for the squeeze on that juice.
And again, we're going to compare their schedule to Texas just because that seems to be the two teams that really are in the conversation for this SEC title, but then also have the most impact on each other, kind of being over under those 9.5 wins. Texas, as we mentioned, has these pockets where it's a little bit of a break, then they can turn the gas up, then they have a little bit. Georgia has to kind of keep their foot on the gas a
All
little bit
gas.
more. You know,
Yep.
all gas, no breaks for the most part, because you're looking at Tennessee, home Alabama. Those are both ones where they cannot take their foot off the gas pedal. Then you host Kentucky. Maybe you can kind of have a little bit of a breather. You go to Auburn, which again, maybe you can take a deep breath, but it is a road game in the SEC,
Yeah.
so you never know. Hosting Ole Miss, foot needs to be on the gas pedal. I have that one circled as one that I think could go either way. Let's think about last season and how everything transpired. And then you go to Florida, foot on the gas to the max, because again, that Florida Georgia game is one where it doesn't matter where either team is at. It's a charged game. Mississippi State away. All right, maybe you take a little bit of a breath, and then you host Texas. And that is one where they're going to have to be ready, because Texas is hungry to get that win over Georgia. You get to breathe a little bit with Charlotte. And I'm really interested to see how this Georgia Tech game plays out, because
Don't
last
overlook it.
season,
Don't overlook it.
last season, I remember getting a lot less sleep than originally planned,
Oh.
because I stayed up watching
We
that
all stayed up.
Georgia Tech game.
Hey,
And so
I actually had a live bet on Georgia for that game, which was just the craziest. I'm like, Georgia's not going to lose to Georgia Tech. Can we get real? And then 19 overtimes later, I was like, oh, sigh of relief.
And it is worth noting that at SEC Media Days, the head of officiating for the SEC did announce some changes in the overtime rules, which maybe we can get into in a later video where we kind of dive in what that's going to look like. And he did have some kind of subtweets referencing that Georgia Tech game, because a lot of people were in the same position as you, Brenden, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting some more and doing some more waiting for that game. So I have that one circled, because I think after last year, it's going to be one that you get the popcorn out now, at least for the next couple of years, until maybe Georgia kind of proves that, all right, we're not going to have that happen again. Or Georgia Tech says, you know what, we're going to come out swinging on this one and get revenge from last year.
I've never seen so many failed 2-point conversions in my life. I mean, I was like pleading, please get 2 yards. And then I was like, okay, please stop Georgia Tech from getting 2 yards. And then, okay, Georgia, it's real simple. Just go get 1.5 yards. No, okay. That was insane. I kind of had memory hold that because of the lack of sleep that happened that night. But that's what we love about college football. And again, that's one that's not going to impact SEC standings. And so when we're thinking about, the betting angles on that, I'm staying away when it comes to the 9.5. Do I expect Georgia to probably clear it? I do. I just don't like the odds that are associated with that. And so then we kind of move forward into wondering, all right, college football playoff. We didn't see any 9-3 teams get in last year from the SEC, but I think Georgia's schedule is so tough. A 9-3 from them this year would end up getting them in. Honestly, obviously, Georgia winning the SEC championship allowed them to kind of forego the committee, and it didn't end up mattering what their regular season record was. Georgia right now is a minus 250 to make the college football playoff, which implies that they are expected to be there. The odds that are interesting, everybody's going to want to know. There's only one championship that really matters in Athens, Georgia. It's the national championship. Plus 700. That's third on the board. A little bit behind Ohio State, a little bit behind Texas to begin the season. Do we think that the Dogs could actually win a national championship this year, get back to where it feels like they belong, if you ask folks down there in Athens?
I think so, but I think it's going to take a win over Texas in the regular season. And I do think that SEC championship game is going to be a huge factor, because I think winning that SEC championship game will allow Georgia to take a breath, depending on where they're at in the season. They win that SEC championship game, they can fully prepare on going all the way on this college football playoff, and not teetering that line that we saw with some of these 9-3 SEC teams, where are we going to get it? Are we not? Are we going to get it? Are we not? I do think their strength of schedule can be an asset to them in that regard, especially if they can win some of these toss-ups, specifically the win over Texas in the SEC championship game. I think that sets them up well to make a serious run and hopefully take it farther than they did last year.
And look, that's what they did last year, at least in the regular season and down there in Atlanta. They took care of business when push came to shove against Texas. For that reason, Georgia fans are not going to enjoy the next sentence out of my mouth. But I did say on our Texas preview that I have Texas marked down to win the national championship this year. It's not to say that Georgia can't make the SEC championship. It's not to say they couldn't beat Texas if it were a rematch again in the SEC championship. But I think Texas is a team that's going to get better as the year goes along. Their quarterback in Arch Manning is going to gain more experience. And so if you had that matchup again happening in the college football playoff and maybe even in the final game of the season, something tells me as of today I'm going to lean Texas. But we know that you can't overlook Georgia. And so that's a reason I would be staying away from the bet as far as the plus 700 on the dogs. I imagine a lot of the audience would say, nope, I'm still trusting that Kirby Smart is going to get it done. And hey, if nothing else, you're getting a little bit of extra bonus funds on that because they're a plus 700, whereas Ohio State, Texas, only they're at plus 550 at DraftKings Sportsbook.
Well, November 15th will definitely be that date that's circled when they take on Texas. And then, of course, we'll get our first look at Georgia come August 30th, where they host Marshall. But we'll continue to follow the Bulldogs throughout the season and, of course, continue our previews with all of our other SEC teams to see where things end up and where the reigning SEC champions end. But for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, and we'll see you guys at the next one.